it's Mandy here. Oh, hi everyone, it's Mandy here, and I'm here with Dr. Glen Singleman, who's one of the most incredible, extraordinary adventures and doctors and risk analysis, safety officers I've ever met. I'm going to let him introduce himself. Everyone meet Glen. Glen, would you please introduce yourself to the audience?
Thanks, Amanda, and hi, everyone. As Amanda said, I am a doctor of medicine, and I work with Amanda on physical and psychological programs for mostly extreme sports people, and including yachties and stuff like that. And my personal background is, as well as being a doctor and lecturer in extreme sport, so I've also got a world record in extreme sport. My wife and I have the world record for high altitude base jumping. And everybody says to me, how is it possible for you to be a doctor and an extreme sports person? Because they seem to be totally at odds in terms of lifestyle, in terms of risk management, in terms of, just direction of life, and meaning. But for me, they're actually complementary, because I learned a lot of the risk management skills that I apply in extreme sport. I learned that through medicine, because in medicine, especially expedition medicine, extreme sport medicine, and emergency medicine that I practice, you learn to manage risk in other people's lives. You're always giving them advice about managing risk to decrease effective disease. And there's something very special about being able to incorporate those messages of risk management into something that you're doing yourself, and to actually take that to an extreme and practice an extreme sport and use that same risk management and psychological sort of profile methodology. It's incredibly fulfilling, and it's actually changed the whole shape of my life. Like when I started doing extreme sport, there wasn't a thing called extreme sport medicine, but now there's university programs in it. And now we have so much more understanding of the science and psychology behind what is, to me, one of the most powerful movements, personal development movements on the planet. Because let's think about it for a minute. Popular sports, team sports, baseball, football, cricket, they're declining in participation, they're declining in popularity at the same time as extreme sports, skiing, mountain biking, skydiving, sailing. These sports are increasing in popularity, and soon team sports will be playing second fiddle to extreme sport. Why is that? What's going on?
Yep.
Obviously, from the outset, there's got to be a reward. There has to be a personal reward in participating in extreme sport. And that's what I've more or less devoted my professional life to understanding now. What is the nature of that transcendent experience that can come with extreme sport? So should we get into that discussion, Amanda, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, because that was the
Okay.
on the end of my lips. It's like, yes, why?
So the important thing to understand about the psychology of extreme sport is there's a couple of myths around that extreme sport is not. Extreme sport is not a death wish. Extreme sport is not because we're crazy. Extreme sport is not because we're an adrenaline junkie. I mean, those myths are easily dispelled, but extreme sport is something else. The extreme sport can be a bunch of fun. Let's face it, Yahoo, that can be the sort of Yahoo fun, that was fast, that was cool, whatever. But it can be an avenue to a profound life-changing experience. It can be an avenue to experience what the psychologist Csikszentmihalyi calls flow, and what another psychologist, Maslow, earlier than him, that they called peak experience. Maslow was the first psychologist to start studying and writing about human motivation. And we've all heard of, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And when he came...
Can I just interrupt? Some
Yeah.
people haven't, because I do mention it in my classes sometimes. So could you, like, in just 2 minutes, just quickly remind people about the triangle and what
Okay.
Maslow was trying to explain there, and then we'll move on.
So Maslow talked about, he interviewed lots and lots of people to find out what motivated them, and they're at the base level for all of us, we all have physiological needs. We've got to have air, warmth, water, food. There are physiological needs. And then once those needs are satisfied, we have the capacity psychologically to think of something else. Well, the next thing that we think of in terms of a kind of building a pyramid is safety needs. We all need security. We all need various, things that mark us, give us that sense of security. And then once that's solved or settled, we start thinking about loving and belonging. We all have love needs, loving other people, loving our environment, and belonging to a tribe. It's part of this, the sort of the psychological structure and function of who we are when we're, not just when we're on the savannah, but now that we've become a modern civilization, there's still those belonging and loving needs. And then the next thing that we need, once we've kind of got that part of ourselves and our lives sorted, is we need a sense of esteem. We need to, like, a sense of self-respect and a sense of respect from others around us, so that it's a recognition of kind of who we are, what we're capable of. But then the highest level that Maslow described was what he called the level of self-actualization. This is a level of psychological and usually physical fulfillment that is the essential essence of all of our capabilities, all come together all at once. And typically this self-actualization is pictured as the top of a triangle. We all have the physiological needs at the bottom, and then the safety needs, the love and belonging needs, the esteem needs. But the very pinnacle is self-actualization. And Maslow was fascinated by this. He wanted to know, what is this thing called self-actualization? On the outer level, it looks like success, but there is way more to it than just, I've got a lot of money, I've got a lot of power. People who understand, who enjoy real success, are actually people who are self-actualized. And so Maslow went and interviewed a whole bunch of, he interviewed Einstein and Roosevelt and all of these incredibly well-known, successful people. And he asked them, what is this measure? What is the pinnacle of your life, of your being, of who you are? And all of them described what he summarized as self-actualization, these moments of focus and engagement where they performed to their perfection. Those moments, those breakthrough moments, when Einstein came up with those incredible theories, when Roosevelt saw how he could win the war, when the top musicians of the world, Rachmaninoff and people, when they composed those incredible works of art. All of these people describe a similar background, in that they were completely engaged in what they were doing. They lost the sense of time. All of their thoughts and their actions just flowed one into another, like connected together, like the notes in a piece of jazz music. And these people described themselves as feeling completely whole, completely alive, but connected to not just themselves, but connected to the whole world. And that's what Maslow came to term self-actualization. And he described it as the sort of pinnacle of psychological development in terms of describing our needs, our hierarchy of needs, who we are. And he actually describes self-actualization as probably the meaning of life. Because people who actually, not all of us get to experience these moments of self-actualization, but those of us who do tend to find ourselves chasing those special moments because you got a taste of what's possible. You got a taste of who you are. You came to understand what's possible in this life. For one moment in eternity, you were 150, 100% all that you could be. And those moments, they're sort of addictive, but they're mostly insightful because they blow away everything that you thought was your limits before that. They blow fear out of the water. They blow the self-fulfilling barrier. They blow all of that away because you get this understanding of, wow, something transcendent is actually possible. It is possible to bring together all the disparate elements and all the education and all the understanding and all the training that I've ever had, all in my life, can come into that one boom, moment of absolute focus, clarity, commitment, dedication, and doing, being. And that, for people who experience those moments, you kind of want a bit more, you tend to chase after that as a kind of meaning to your life. Like, Einstein wanted to keep coming up with brilliant formulas that define physics, and famous violin players just want to play another perfect piece. The research of what's going on in these states, we're now using MRI scanners to understand that, we're activating different parts of our brain. In fact, one of the really interesting bits of research that I've been involved with is putting people into MRI scanners and letting them relive these moments of self-actualization and understanding what's going on in their brain. Because interestingly enough, the things, what we call a default mode network, that network that sort of hums along, when we're doing day-to-day stuff, that has to be deactivated in order for another part of the brain, it's usually the right parietal lobe, to activate a type of big picture cohesive consciousness that connects things together. And it seems as though the psychology of peak performance, of self-actualization, is about the psychology of connection, not just connection to who we are as individuals, but connection to other people. And also, what's really exciting is connection to the environment, Because I mean, I know as a skydiver that when I get out of a plane, I am part of the sky. When I'm climbing a mountain, I am part of the mountain. When I'm sailing, I am part of the ocean. Actually, I'm more part of the ocean when I'm diving. I'm really getting into kind of diving and stuff, because the immersion in the ocean, or the immersion in land, or that's about a connectedness to the environment. And one of the interesting things about, or one of the psychological movements that I'm interested in and I write about a bit, is ecological psychology, which has its basis in the idea that we evolved as a species that was a part of nature. We were a part of nature, but nature was an inherent part of us. Nature is a part of our psychology. Nature is a part of who we are. And when we go and separate ourselves from nature, when we live, in cities or a concrete jungle, we've taken ourselves out of nature, and that has a toll. That's got a price. And the price is, depression, anxiety, neurosis, all the things that people who don't experience nature, that's what's going on for them. The nature inside them, that longing to be connected to nature, I believe that's part of what sort of flares up when people get anxiety, depression, neurosis. And the interesting, I guess, scientific support for that is that there's quite a few studies around now basically saying that exercise is just as effective as antidepressants for most depression. And exercise in the wilderness is even more potent, because it's re-establishing that kind of prehistoric genetic link that we have to our environment. And the nice thing I've discovered about discovering this connectedness to a broader, not just, a broader personal possibility, but connectedness to the environment. The nice thing about that is, if you're connected to the environment, you don't want to, cut it down or burn it up or mine the crap out of it or blow it up. You have this inherent respect, because killing the environment is actually killing a part of yourself. And to get that awareness through doing something that you're passionate about, like extreme sport, it's an incredibly exciting possibility. I mean, it's not every time. I mean, like I said, lots of people go out and do extreme sport because it's fun. It's a bit of a thrill ride. But there is the possibility, if you have the mindset, to go beyond that thrill into the areas of flow, self-actualization, and connection. And that is the really exciting possibility, or it's not just a possibility, it's an actuality of the research into extreme sport and extreme sport medicine.
I think one of the things that really interests me at the moment, when I started looking into the flow state and, looking into extreme sports psychology and reading the course that you wrote for us, so amazing, was also when you really look at the research about when, you jump out of the plane and you have that moment where you transform fear into flow. And they say that one of the problems with modern society is that we're all, mouth breathing as if we're on a major hunt, all through the night when we sleep. Our amygdala is just flying. We're basically being chased by a bear that's not there. And so do you think, when what extreme sports and understanding psychology can give you is that ability to transform fear into flow, whereas the rest of us are just living in fear and being chased by that bear? Do you think that helps us calm the farm and settle the nervous system and be able to self-actualize?
Yeah, I do. I agree with you on that, Amanda, because one of the, I guess, problems of technically it's the ACTH, adrenal cortex problem, where when you get stressed, you're releasing hormones from your pituitary, which activate your adrenal gland and release adrenaline, noradrenaline into your bloodstream and get you ready for the fight, flight, freeze response. And you've increased the muscle, the blood flow to your muscle, you've dilated your pupils, you've decreased the amount of blood flow to your gut. You increase your blood sugar level, which has got a name, it's called diabetes. You increase your blood pressure ready for that fight, flight, freeze thing. And we all know that if you do that, too many hours a day, well, that's got a name too, hypertension, and it leads to things like cardiovascular disease and stroke and all of the lifestyle diseases that unfortunately are an epidemic in our society. When this system evolved, when we were like hunter-gatherers on the savannah and stuff, the Pleistocene and all of that, it had a really important and powerful function, and that was, to deal with danger, because danger did jump out of the jungle at you, and you had to fight it, run away from it, or freeze and hope that it wouldn't eat you. But there was a time limit on it. That usually that danger, jumped out. Either you fought it off, you ran away, or it ignored you. So there was this sort of a certain amount of time, and then it was done. And then you kind of went back to most of the rest of what was a very stable lifestyle. I mean, humanity was fairly stable in hunter-gatherer tribes for about 10,000 years before the agrarian revolution kind of came along and we started living in societies and that stuff. And that was when it's more in the post-industrial society that stress comes in a different form. It doesn't jump out of the jungle at you anymore. It's that dickhead who just cut you off in the traffic. And or the idiot boss who can't possibly see what you see. All of these kind of chronic stressors don't really have a release. I mean, when we take on a mortgage, we've taken on a 25-year commitment, which in 25 years, I'll be over that one in 25 years. But what if it activates my ACTH adrenal pathway for 25 years? I'm going to be dead, because that level of stress, the body is not designed for that level of constant grinding stress. So one of the things that actually extreme sport taught me and my wife was to use that pathway, that kind of the fear-generated pathway, use it for what it was intended, to meet a real challenge with it, and then to say, okay, that was great. We jumped out of the plane, we jumped off the mountain, we got to the top, we went into, and now we can relax, because now we're connected to we're sort of feeling better about ourselves. We've gone through that esteem part of the pyramid into the self-actualization part, and we feel really comfortable that we have performed. We've understood what it means to perform at our perfection. And that brings a level of control, not just psychological control, but physical control into our lives. So that for my wife and I, things that, it puts fear in perspective for us, because we have jumped off mountains, we have jumped out of planes. That's what real fear looks like. And this other stuff like, the mortgage or the burnt toast or whatever, that's nothing. And you get the right perspective. You're able to say, that stuff, it's nothing, because I have performed to my perfection with that self-actualization stuff. Everything else doesn't really matter. And that's an incredibly powerful release to psychological release. Like you overcome the fear, and that level of control spreads out into the rest of your life, so that other things that were scary, they're not a problem anymore. I mean, my wife and I get it. We've got up and spoken to audiences of 15,000 people, which would have been a terrifying concept to me not that many years ago. But now it's like, yeah, it's just standing in front of 15,000 people on a stage, without being that flippant about it. I'm still pretty focused on that. But it puts fear and the human physiological response to fear into a more meaningful perspective. And that's incredibly powerful.
Yeah, I'd love to share how I learned about that in a completely different way. But having been fascinated by the nervous system, as a trauma nurse and a professional sailor, and doing lots of Sydney Hobarts and crazy things where you are pushed in that environment, it was only when I came to horsemanship that I really started to understand the importance of having those breaks. And I learned that and it was a mutual friend, Warwick Schiller, was talking, and he said that he had a lady who was on a horse and she rode past 10 rabbits, and the first 9 rabbits, the horse just went past. And then the 10th rabbit, it absolutely bolted and took off. And she's like, but we've already been past 9 rabbits. What was the problem with the 10th rabbit? Did it have a white dot or a floppy ear or a weird vibe? And he said, no, it was when the horse saw the first rabbit, it got a bit stressed. And then when it saw the next one, it got a bit more stressed. So it's like you burn your toast, you drive to work and that guy cuts in front of you. And of course, that's the day the boss is going to be a dick, and then you spill your coffee on your white shirt, and they're all mounting. And his theory behind that is to let the horse lick and chew. And so now I have this joke with myself, because I started when I got my new horse, I had to start really working on its nervous system because it came with some anxiety. And I thought, so we go for a walk and I'd see him get stressed and I'd just stop and let him lick and chew. And then I started making jokes in my own life, and I was like, oh, that was a bit much. That, that was a big, Spinnaker shoot, and, someone nearly died.
The old trigger stacking, they call that one. Yeah.
Right, I need to lick and chew. And so I said it out loud the other day, and someone was like, you need to what? I was like, don't worry about it. That it really shows, that we're not taking that time to lick and chew. And I guess that's what you and Heather got to do in your sports, is have that moment and then come down and give yourselves a space to recalibrate, rather than going off on another jump or another adventure too quickly.
Well, and also we got the opportunity to reflect on what it was that we've done, or those things we've done, and to look for what we got out of that personally, and to delve into that. And well, I'm a very analytical sort of scientific person. I like to, and whereas Heather's a lot more intuitive and emotional, and we kind of complement each other very, very much in our interpretation of what is fundamentally physically the same experience. We get out of the plane, we fly together, we open the parachute, we land. That stuff, on one level, it looks like, oh, well, you just did the same thing. But for Heather and I, we were on different planets. And the nice thing is we understand that there's a connectedness to those different experiences. And the connectedness is the capacity for reflection, and the capacity to the opportunity to look for meaning in what we did, and look for meaning within ourselves. And that's a very important thing that most people don't get time or have energy to kind of consider in their day-to-day lives, because everything we do, it's still psychologically important, but we really kind of get the opportunity, a lot of us don't really sit down at the end of the day and say, what did that day really mean? Did I, get to that level of self-actualization today? Did I get a new insight, a satori? Did I kind of get an understanding of the people that I'm with, or the partner, the partner that I'm going through life with, whatever. That capacity for self-reflection is often missing from our sort of day-to-day lives. And you can track.
We don't have time because we're too busy, because we get home and we've got to watch
Well,
out.
time and experience. I mean, it's one of the things that Heather and I do a lot of is meditation. And we find that meditation is a great technique for not only balancing the sort of the two sides of our brain, and balancing the sort of the disparate, desires and stuff that's going on through the day. It's also an opportunity for reflection and to build that sort of practice of just mindfulness, being in the moment, being in the possibility of right now. And that's a technique that it's pretty well understood, pretty well taught. There's been a lot of scientific research by Herbert Benson and people like that into the various psychological benefits of meditation. And I mean, that's a completely different talk, as you know, but it's certainly one of the techniques that we use. And one of the other techniques we use a lot is is mental rehearsal. We couple mental rehearsal with breath control, because one of the really interesting books out there, you might have you read that book, Breathe?
I recommend it to all my clients. The Lost Art.
It's an amazing book.
Change
Really amazing
about
book.
the mouth breathing and the nose breathing, and attention deficit, dyslexia. It's I'll put it in the comments below. I tell everyone to read it.
So one of the really neat things out of that is Heather and I have learned to control our breathing in incredibly stressful situations, because just to sort of summarize what that means is when we're relaxed, we mostly breathe with our diaphragm. Our diaphragm is going up and down at the bottom of our lungs. And when it goes down, our tummies go out. And you can look at it where, as you're sort of sitting there listening to this, you watch your tummy go out and in, and that corresponds to the diaphragm lowering and raising. That's how we breathe when we're relaxed. When we're in the fight, freeze stuff, where everything's tight, our diaphragm is tight, we're breathing with the muscles up the top, and we're ready to punch or run or whatever. That's a completely different style of breathing. And a lot of people who get anxious or, into a scary situation or get nervous about something, they go into that state without understanding, and they change their breathing pattern and that tells their brain, I'm breathing like I'm about to fight a monster. Therefore, I must be in an incredibly stressful situation. So I've got to release all of those stress hormones, and I've got to be ready and put my blood sugar up, put my blood pressure up, dilate it. But if you deliberately start breathing, even if you are in a stressful situation, but you start breathing with your belly, moving your abdomen in and out, moving your diaphragm up and down, your body is telling your brain, I'm relaxed. And no matter what your brain is sort of thinking, like, I'm standing in front of the boss or I'm doing a presentation in front of 15,000 people, or I'm about to jump off a cliff, whatever, I shouldn't be stressed. But hey, my body's relaxed. It's a biofeedback technique that I know can work even when you are about to jump off a cliff. I got into a new style of base jumping years ago called wingsuit base jumping, which it's on a normal base jump, you sort of bend your body backwards, kind of like a banana, and fall into the airstream before you open your parachute. On a wingsuit base jump, you've got to do the exact opposite. You've got to cup the air with your body. And it's a completely new style of jumping, and fear of the new is one of our most fundamental fears. And I was nervous as standing on the cliff about to do my first wingsuit base jump. And I practiced this technique of breathing. Pushed my belly out, sucked it back in. My body told my brain, I'm relaxed. I got this. I've done the training. I got the technology. I've used my judgment. I'm ready to go in this moment. And the other thing that I did at the same time, as well as controlling my breathing, was I imagined a perfect wingsuit base jump. I went over and over and over in my brain what it looked like, what it sounded like, what it smelled like, what it felt like. I understood each modality of a perfect base jump in my head. And I did it again, and I did it again, and I did it again. I matched it with my breathing. I did it again. I did it again. I stood on the edge of the cliff. I timed it 1 minute and 42 seconds. I stood there, and then I was ready. I committed. I did it. I did it perfectly. It was just a matter of translating that perfectly imagined relaxed jump into reality. Boom, did it. And I mean, I know that it is possible to use these techniques to control what is one of our most gut-wrenching, raw, primitive fears, you know, the fear of falling.
And it's really interesting too, because so many people talk about positive affirmations these days, and it shows why they don't work well. You're like, I'm relaxed, I'm relaxed, I'm relaxed. Everything in my world's perfect. And you're breathing like a maniac, and your whole body's acting like it's being chased by the bear that's not there. But if you actually do it and match it with the breath, and it would have, that's why it works for some people and not others. It's like, you got to do,
Yeah.
if you're going to, you got to be it, you've got to embody that and breathe like you're relaxed. You can't just can't.
Yeah.
Something I want to ask you is something we talked a lot about when we were on our last expedition, and a lot of the work you're really getting into now is cognitive dissonance in extreme sports and in horsemanship. I was wondering if you could talk into that a little bit and why that particular topic caught your attention.
So I've done a lot of analyses of accidents in extreme sport, and something I've come to understand more and more is the human factor. I mean, typically they say in skydiving, 90% of accidents are caused by the human factor, not by technology failing, but by the human making incorrect decisions, incorrect judgments. And that often falls into patterns of reproducible error, in particular cognitive biases. And I'm fascinated by cognitive biases because they are problems inherent in the machinery that we've got, inherent in the brain. The brain, you know, while it comes with these wonderful gifts, it also comes with some problems. And a lot of the problems are related to the gifts. For example, our brains are wonderful at making conclusions based on incomplete data. And I mean, that's great because, you know, you don't need to sort of see the whole tiger emerging from behind the leaf to know it's a tiger. And that means you can act more quickly and run away when its ear pokes up rather than when the whole thing and its tail are jumping at you. The brain is wonderful at jumping to conclusions based on insufficient data. But you can imagine there are also problems with that. lots of times we get it wrong. Lots of times, it wasn't really, especially with other people's behavior. We imagine stuff, we build stuff into, oh, so-and-so acted that way because blah, blah, blah. In fact, no, they didn't. It was completely different reason. That was just something that you kind of made up. And these cognitive biases, these errors of judgment, these errors of reasoning, these errors of memory, these shortcuts that we take can profoundly affect our decision making. And in extreme sport, decision making matters. If you get it wrong in extreme sport, you're going to get hurt or die. That's more or less the definition of what an extreme sport is. A sport where an error can result in injury or death. So it's very important to be really clear about your decision making in all aspects of extreme sport. And my wife and I spend a lot of time trying to bring a lot of these cognitive biases into our conscious mind so that we can make informed, rational, reasonable choices. Because unfortunately, a lot of these cognitive biases, they work on an unconscious level. In particular, the affect heuristic is a bias that comes from the limbic system. The limbic system is our system that responds to frightening things. It's the limbic system is constantly analyzing all of our sensory inputs, everything we see, hear, feel, touch, smell. It's analyzing that, looking for danger, and it's ready to respond very quickly. 0.1 of a second, it can respond, but it's only got 3 responses: fight, flight, or freeze. And I mean, that's great when the danger is jumping out of the jungle at you, but it's not so good when, danger comes from movements in the stock market or movements in the, the corporate sale price of whatever. That's not a real appropriate response, and it can deprive us of opportunities for growth if we're just constantly jumping to these heuristic shortcut decisions. So I guess most of the ways that people know to overcome these cognitive biases, and there's about 170 described cognitive biases that we all are susceptible to on an unconscious level. The way to kind of overcome most of those is to bring them up to consciousness as much as possible so that you can use your cognitive powers and your reason and your education and your understanding to move beyond those gut reaction based sort of cognitive biases. In extreme sport, optimism bias is a real problem. Oh, she'll be okay. I know that everything's going to be fine on the day. We'll get to the top of Everest, that we'll get to the top and back before that storm comes in. I just know we will. That kind of optimism bias has killed a lot of my friends. And I spend a lot of time thinking about the decisions that I'm making in an extreme environment, understanding that every decision could kill me or get me hurt. So I've got to make it the right decision, but also I've got to make it in a time efficient, effective manner. I can't sit here all day analysing the Oxford, scientific meteorological data and this data and that data. I've got to keep putting one foot in front of the other and climbing the mountain. That you kind of got to balance these different things that are going on. And I'm very proud of the way that Heather and I have been able to make what we regard as the right choices most of the time. And interestingly, sometimes it's no. Sometimes it's today is not the day for this. And when that happens, we've got to be, yep, where this is the wrong the wrong thing to do today, we will run away. We will let the freeze thing go on. We will preserve our possibility to come back another time. That's a really tough one. I've walked to there's a beautiful cliff that I've jumped off many times in the north of Italy at Arco. And sometimes there's the Lumistral, a crosswind that comes up from Lake Garda and blows up the valley. And when it in the middle of the day, it blows about 20 knots. Jumping into a 20 knot side wind is a big mistake when you've got a parachute on your back. So you kind of got to be up there early. And if you're not up there early enough, it took you a bit long to walk up there, or you got out of bed late or whatever, and it's blowing 5, gusting 10. Oh, should I go? It's kind of all of that stuff's going through your head, and you have to be able to be really rational and kind of make these algorithmic rules. I have friends who, when they're climbing or guiding Everest, they turn around at 2 o'clock, whether they're on the summit, whether they're 10 feet below the summit, or whether they're 250 feet below, they turn around at 2 o'clock, because that gives you that kind of margin of error. I mean, and that's the kind of thing that I guess we all wish we could do that all the time, but these cognitive biases, come up and often really get in the way of rational, logical, sensible decision making.
And I'm really glad you mentioned the optimist one, because I think that's the times I've been in the most danger, is when we were too optimistic about climbing a mountain or crossing a sea, or starting a Hobart when someone had taken 3 reefs out because they didn't think we'd need it in the Bass Strait. So yeah, and it, because it's such a thing these days to be positive and to say that, manifest things and say all the right things, but it can actually become quite dangerous, which is something I love about working with you. When I tell people about you and our team, no offense, but you've heard it, people like, oh my God, him and his wife must be bonkers, like jumping off all these mountains. I'm like, it's the safest, person ever. And I always put you forward as a risk assessor for the Northwest Passage and Antarctica, because actually I know, yeah, you've got, a huge drive and you've done some incredible things, but you're actually one of the safest people I know, and very calculated in your risk assessments.
Yeah, thanks. We're very proud of that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's incredible. So I'm so grateful for your time. It's been I could talk to you about this for hours and hours, and I think I intend to continue this conversation. But what I want to finish with is a couple of questions, if that's okay. So first of all, if I was to bring a super yacht crew that were about to go down to Antarctica, and wanted to build a strong team, and we wanted some resilience training. If you had 3 days to train us, what would be your plan? What would you do with us?
Well, in any undertaking, you've got to look at the risks involved in your technology, the risks involved in your team, and the risks involved in the environment. And there's certain, I guess, I like to sort of call it like the 20 question routine. And in my case, it's, what are the 20 ways I can die here, now, or, in the next little while, doing what I'm going to do. And then considering all of those problems, it's then about developing a framework of risk management, a framework in the context of, what technology do I need? What skills do I need to develop within the team? And how am I going to judge that the environment, that I can operate in this environment? What are the parameters in terms of, how many knots of wind, or what wave height, or, what strength of score for the all that kind of stuff. You define all of these problems around the nature of your challenge. And one of the things, I mean, I worked with James Cameron, the famous Hollywood filmmaker, and one of the things that I learned and worked with him a lot on was understanding the real skills that you need as a team. And I was part of Jim's expedition to take a submersible to the bottom of the Mariana Trench. And we were limited by the size of the support ship. We could have 50 people. That was it. So what if you can only take 50 people as part of your team? What set of skills do you need in your 50 people? You've got to be really clear about, okay, well, I need, underwater communications experts. I need engineers who can fix propulsion devices. I need engineers who can fix power devices. I need a doctor who can manage the team. I need filmmakers who can make sure all of this stuff works in the middle of nowhere. I need, you go through all of the nitty gritty of what your challenge entails, and then what skills you need to put together in your team. And that's just kind of the beginning point, because there are lots of people in the world who are good engineers at this, good engineers at that. But how do you make those 50 very different people, how do you make them work together? And, in Jim's case, what he was really good at doing was connecting people to a goal that's greater than themselves. And we all felt, when Jim went down to the bottom of the Mariana Trench, it was all of us going. It wasn't just Jim Cameron, it was all of us. We all put, our heart, our body, our soul into that expedition. We were a part of something greater than ourselves. And that commitment to like a transcendent goal was what brought us all together, a bunch of people with different personality, different goals, different dreams, different pain thresholds, different fear thresholds, different visions of, the meaning of life. All of these people were unified under a banner of a greater accomplishment. And that was the secret to the success of that group, connecting to something greater than yourself. And that's something that, I believe it's the sort of the essence, the secret ingredient of every team. And it's the real challenge of a leader to find that essence and then to connect everybody to that essence, so that they're all feeling, the whole team is feeling like they are part of something much greater than themselves. And therefore, it's like a kind of team self-actualization. And that being able to find that, help everybody find that in the context of whatever the goal is, that's the challenge of a true leader. And when you get that, when the team gets that insight and that understanding, that's when they're truly great.
Incredible. Super inspiring for all the leaders listening, that, that gentle reminder too, about reminding the team about why they're waking up each morning, and what the common goal is, whether it's let's just give the guests the best charter they've ever had, or let's, do this refit, or let's explore this incredible place on the earth, safely and beautifully as we can. I think that's just a really nice reminder of how easy it gets to be, if we have that common goal and focus.
Yeah, I believe that.
Well, it's been so awesome having this conversation, and I do look forward to having expeditions and some more fun times with you later in the year. And if you guys want to find out more about Glen or the projects we're working on together, and the rest of our team who you'll be meeting through this series, then reach out. And yeah, thanks again for your time. It's just been an awesome discussion.
Great. Thanks, Amanda. Wonderful to meet you all. See you out on the blue yonder.
Yes, you will. Thank you.